Hello, I'm Fast Lawyer. I'm with Oculus Rift Reviews. Today we're going to review and play Bandit Point VR, a game on the Steam store for every headset. It normally retails for about $10. It's currently on sale $7.49 during the Steam Winter Sale 2019. I bought it on sale a few days ago, and I do recommend this game, but with several caveats. So this is basically a shooter, and I wouldn't call it a wave shooter because I think there's enough here to separate it from all the wave shooters in VR. This has a story. This has pretty big levels that you can traverse and progress through. There's a nice variety of enemies, and you even have two different boss fights. And one of those boss fights actually repeats, so you might want to say there's three boss fights, but I'll just say there's only two boss fights with two different bosses. And this has a cool mechanic where you can possess enemies, so there's a little bit of strategy here. Basically, you want to possess enemies whenever it's advantageous to do so. So if you're taking a lot of damage, you might consider then possessing a new enemy. Or if there's a particular enemy type that you like, you might want to consider possessing that enemy. And you might even intentionally get damage. Therefore, when you possess a new enemy, it's just easier to beat your old self. There's verticality to these levels, so a lot of times you're climbing up stairs, you're finding abilities from certain robots that you possess to open new passages. Like for here, you have to use the electric bow. So there's a couple of different types of enemies you need to use. One's the archer, and the archer has like an electric bow, and you'll need that to start up generators and such. There's also a little robot with a revolver and a magic wand that also shoots out like electricity from its wand. You also have a regular robot which just has a machine gun. You have one with missiles that fires out of it, and then you have one that basically you're jousting, and that one's pretty cool. I don't think I've played a VR game where you can actually joust and it actually works well in the game. So kudos to the developer for that enemy design, that level design, that gameplay design. This game is about 2 to 3 hours long depending on your skill. There is full locomotion, and there is snap turning as well as a comfort option, and there are actually several graphics options as well and sound options. So this game does have good settings where you can change for your preferences. And as far as content, it does have more content than most other shooters, although I won't say it has a lot of content. Again, you can beat the game in 2 to 3 hours just depending on your skill level. However, I will say this game does get a little repetitive towards the end. There's not a whole lot of enemy variety, so like I mentioned, all those enemies you can possess, but that's basically all the types of enemies. Now, there are a couple of things that keep the game fresh. There's these battleships that you do like a little interludes in between. There's like little puzzles to solve, figuring out how to open up a passageway to get to the next level, and there's the two boss fights that I mentioned before. But I did experience several issues, especially on the last boss fight. So I beat the game on normal difficulty. It took me about 3 hours, but I experienced several technical difficulties. Enemies didn't spawn correctly in the last boss fight, and if they don't, you can't beat the boss, and it took me a while to figure that out. So I was just with the last boss fight, and I had probably spent 10, 15, 20 minutes on that boss fight, wondering what's going on, how come this boss fight won't end. So I finally decided, you know what, I need to quit and restart and see what happens, and sure enough, new enemies did spawn, which made it possible to actually get past the boss, because you're actually not looking to damage the final boss. A little spoiler there. So that happened several times. Obviously, the first time was the most difficult one because I didn't know that was an issue, and I was just continuing with the boss fights for what seemed like forever until I finally figured out, this boss fight is bugged. I also fell through the game world. There's several clipping issues. One time the game it had trouble going forward. It was on the battleship fight where it just basically crashed. So I did experience several issues even during my short gameplay, and that really left a sour taste in my mouth. The good thing about this game is there are generous checkpoints, except for the last boss fight, which kind of makes sense, except the last boss fight is so bugged that you really don't want to restart the boss fight when you encounter one of those bugs, but you'll probably have to. All in all, I said this game is inventive, but I don't know, there's just like this overall clunkiness to the gameplay, this lack of polish that keeps it from being great. I'm going to give this game a 6.5 out of 10. I'm going to say a buy on sale recommendation. If you're looking for something other than the average wave shooter, go ahead and get this one, but it's not a high recommendation from me.